All right. So this has been long overdue. Obviously, this is something pretty. How can I say? Pretty new. Where this idea started was basically during um it was basically during a times where I was at work and I was just bored. And me being a comic book nerd, I just thought of if I had because I was thinking about Avengers Doomsday. And I was just thinking about if I had control and power over the MCU reset, how would I set it up? So this is basically what if I would do if King Bryson had, all the rights to the Marvel characters, what would be the movie slot, etc., etc. And this is obviously in celebration for and in pretty much preparation to go watch Avengers Doomsday, which comes out later this year on December 18th, 9 days after my birthday. Um, so this is basically disclaimer. This is basically something that I just spitballed. Something that if I had to do something, how would I do it, and what way would I do it? Please don't take the wallpaper um, misleading because just because I have this wallpaper does not mean all the characters that's in this wallpaper is in this universe. So this is basically what this video is gonna be about is me just making my own Marvel universe, my own MCU, and how would it kind of look? How would it kind of look like? Obviously, you have movie companies, you have directors, producers, script writers, different ideas, different things that they want to show in the movie. This is just from my own personal head with me just having fun. So also, there are some characters that you see in the MCU that a lot of them are not in this universe. So don't take it as a jab. Don't take it as if like, oh, I just don't like the character. Again, this is just pure fun. This is just a fan just using his imagination because of how much he loves the product and how much he loves, comic books, specifically Marvel comics. So I was thinking, when it comes to making my own MCU, obviously we're coming off of the years of the MCU dominance, the years of Avengers Infinity War, the years of Civil War, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, Captain America's trilogy, Iron Man's trilogy, all the Fox X-Men universes, Universal movies, the multiverse. Like, we're coming off as a clean slate, but we have rights to all these legendary characters and all these unknown characters that turn into household names, and of course unknown characters that still remain unknown to the public, and very very known characters that are known globally. So I want the first movie to not only be the Kickstarter of the universe, obviously, but I also wanted somebody who has the credibility, enough credibility to where it's like, oh, it's a Marvel movie, it's a Marvel character, and they're resetting everything. Let's see what they do. And I really can't. I really couldn't think of any character. I really couldn't think of any character that hasn't at least been done already. So I had to settle for a character that's not only the biggest face in Marvel, but I had to settle for a character that was already been done, that will put asses in seats, and that's also globally known. I had no choice but to settle with Spider-Man. So Spider-Man will be the first movie in the MCU, in my own personal MCU universe. He's relatable. Spider-Man is known, and of course, it's Spider-Man. You can't really go wrong with Spider-Man. The only thing that when it comes to Spider-Man is, number one, I don't want it to be an origin story. We've already had Tom Holland's, we already had Tobey Maguire's, we already had Andrew Garfield's, we had Spectacular Spider-Man, we had the Amazing Spider-Man, we had Spider-Man the Animated Series, etc., etc., etc. So I want to make sure that this was not an origin story. I did not want this to be a fucking rerun. as a matter of fact, I'm using a villain that's already been done before. So I most definitely do not want to do this as an origin story. Peter will already be Spider-Man. There will be flashbacks where Peter was first bitten and what he had to go through to learn his powers and dealing with life of a vigilante and life of a teenager. So I really want to put focus on him being Spider-Man and him dealing with the split life of vigilante and teenager. Peter will be a young man still living with Aunt May. I haven't really thought about an Aunt May. I want her to be like some level of not no more middle age, but also not their senior either, senior citizen. I'll probably say maybe around 45 ish, 46 ish, somewhere around that area. Peter will be a young man living with Aunt May. Doc Ock is the main villain of the movie. And Doc Ock is going to be a scientist trying his best to get accepted in companies like Roxxon, Oxcorp, Stark Industries, etc. He's not going to be a struggling scientist. He's going to be like a professor. He's going to be like a professor doing side gigs here and there. And he has like projects that he made on the side, but he's really trying to break into the industry of science and wanting to help the world, etc., etc. Oscorp, Stock Industries, etc. Because now that Spider-Man is here, people are now speculating rather powered individuals are born or made. So now that Spider-Man, as you can see, Spider-Man is a thing. You know, he's already a thing. I'll probably say in this movie, Peter will probably be Spider-Man for maybe like a good 2 years. I'll say that. So something similar like the Robert Pattinson's Batman, to where he's been Spider-Man for a while, but he's still young. You know, he's still trying to find his way. Yes, he already has his suit, but he's trying to find his way of doing things, his way of handling the whole life as a vigilante and being a teenager. Um, Now the movie's message is all levels of power come responsibility, and it is up to you whether it's a curse or it's a gift. That's basically the crossroads between Peter Parker slash Spider Man to Doc Ock is having this level of power, having this level of abilities, having all these things that you can do. It comes with a certain level of responsibility, and it is up to you, Peter Parker and Doc and Doctor Octopus. It's up to you to rather decide if that power is going to be a curse or is going to be a gift. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, what I'm trying to lead into. Obviously, throughout the movie, that's pretty much what the movie's going to be based upon. And the movie ends with Doctor Octopus going to a newly built security prison for superpower individuals that was built by Shield and the U.S. government. So Shield is also already a thing, but it's more so known as like a hush hush government agency, and that's connected to the U.S. government. It's not connected to like any other government. It's the U.S. government. It's no different than like the CSI or the FBI, but a lot more government officials kind of thing. And of course, it has an end credit scene. The end credit scene shows a storm and a young rogue meeting Spider-Man in an alley, pretty much bumping into him mid-swing and telling him, "You are not the only one with powers." Which leads us into the second movie in the phase, the X-Men. Now, coming off the first Spider-Man movie, now the public, we got Spider-Man as the friendly neighborhood hero. So the public is kind of like whatever when it comes to superpower individuals, but it's where in this movie to where they actually pop out and it changes the whole entire landscape of society. So, the X Men. After the introduction to Spider Man, the world is highly sensitive to the possibility of superpower individuals. Professor X, being a representative of the idea of some of these powered individuals are born with a curse, while others were made into one. Still, to piggyback off of, having power and responsibilities, and it's up to the person to decide rather that power and responsibility is a curse if it's if it's a gift. But in Professor X's case, trying to speak on behalf of the mutants, there are some who are born with a curse. So he's already acknowledging that it can be a curse, and he's acknowledging that there are some people out there, mostly mutants, who are being taken advantage of, turning reinforcing that mindset of their powers and their responsibilities being a curse. So Professor X plays this representative of, no, there are powered superpowered individuals out there. Some and a lot of, and majority of them are actually born with their powers. They're not like that guy who's swinging in the air, being the friendly neighborhood vigilante. Majority of them actually hide. Majority of them are actually afraid on what if the public finds out. They're actually afraid of what their own government, would do to them once they find out about their innate abilities. So that's pretty much the position that Professor X is coming off of. Now, when it comes to Eric Lenchard, who's not Magneto yet, Eric Lenchard, who's friends with Professor X, he starts out at first siding with Professor X. Obviously, so there's gonna be earlier moments in the movie to where Eric and Professor X are like this when it comes to defending mutants from the public, or slowly trying to introduce mutants to the public. But once it is known that the US government is officially funding agencies like SHIELD and MRD, Eric recruits a gang of young mutants who were arrested. So throughout the movie, there's going to be uh, news panels over in TVs and newspapers, etc., all over social media, of sightings of mutants and being arrested by law enforcement, mostly the SHIELD and the MRD. So Professor, so Charles Xavier and Eric Lynch are basically two representatives of that. But Eric is more so on the extreme side because he's been trying to really give the humans a chance after chance to really try and accept the mutants. It's not until it's found out that it's the government is actually funding these law enforcement to arrest and take mutants away from their families, away from their homes, their schools, if they have jobs, their careers, maybe they have children, etc., etc. So the movie is going to be based off of that. But I also want to surround the true main characters of the film, which is Jean Grey and Cyclops. Excuse me, Jean Grey and Scott Summers. Scott Summers and Jean Grey being the early young mutants, who Professor X had been, aiding and guiding through his mutant safe houses. Not not the school of mutants, safe houses to where mutants have gone through orphanage, other mutants who just have nowhere else to go. Maybe they were signed up and sent from their own human families to just take care of them and watch over them. Of course, they'll keep in touch within the families, etc., etc. But yes, all this changes when Magneto recruits a gang of young mutants who were arrested. Now Eric Lencher, taking a name under Magneto, liberates them and initiates attacks on the agencies. So Eric, now, really trying to dive deep into the vigilante villainous role like Spider-Man, but in his own way, is freeing Sorry, my camera ran out. Where was I? So, Magneto recruits a gang of young mutants who are arrested. Magneto liberates them and initiates attacks on the agencies. Professor X to counter attack this, because now Eric has the mutants looking in a much more negative light to the public, to the public, to where Charles Xavier does not want that. Charles Xavier does not want that, and it's really slowing down the process of what their initial plan was when it comes to mutants being slowly introduced throughout the public. So Professor X builds his own team of mutants from team of mutants that attend his school of mutants and safe houses. School of mutants, not his mansion of mutants, like school of mutants. It's not really like a mansion. It's like just lower income, low funding schools. Because what government agency is going to fund a mutant all school? He's all doing that himself. The X-Men team consists of a young Cyclops, a young Jean, Beast, and Storm, who are Professor X's, teachers and professors of and helpers of his safe homes and his schools. And of course, a young Rogue, who I will be introducing, same as Scott and Jean, but Scott and Jean are pretty much been to his safe homes and his school for a little over a year, to where Rogue is more so like the freshman of the bunch. And Jean and Scott pretty much try their best to like introduce her throughout the schools, the safe houses. This is what we do, this is how we live, etc, etc. That's where the introduction of how these mutants are being cared for throughout the movie. So you have Jean and Scott and Rogue building a friendship building a friendship there. And you have Eric and Professor X, pretty much butting heads about sharing this information about the mutants. And you have Beast and Storm being, the side characters of like being extra hands, extra guidance for the younger mutants. The movie will heavily center on Scott and Jean, with Storm and Beast as professors, seconds in command, since Eric kind of like left Professor X alone. And Rogue trying to fit into a home to where she cannot show physical affection. Obviously, Rogue having the powers to any person she touches, she absorbs their energy, and if she holds on long enough, she can potentially kill them. So that's gonna be dive into of her not being able to even get close to somebody because she's afraid they're die. um, Trying to fit into a home where she cannot show physical affection, with Scott acting as a big brother and Professor X acting as a father figure. Now, the movie ends with Magneto and his forces sent to the the raft. City areas have been damaged by the battle, with the world putting X-Men and mutants on notice. So throughout the movie, there's going to be several fights between the X-Men and Magneto's pretty much gang of mutants. Now there's no necessarily a big fight. It's just Scott and Jean and Rogue um, helping each other to fight little side missions, and Storm and Beast having their own side mission. Now the big main fight is basically going to be Storm and Beast. They're going to be like handling majority of Magneto's little small younger army. Obviously not killing anybody, because they're all mutants. They all know each other, and they're all know of each other. Excuse me. But they're not at the point to where like we gotta kill each other once and for all. They're not there yet. They're sparing each other. And Jean and Scott, as well as Rogue, they're pretty much teaming up to pretty much have that big trio of just bonding throughout the fight, etc., etc. And of course, Jean showing how powerful she really is when it comes to her telekinesis and her telepathy. And of course, Scott getting used to having control of the black of his lasers through his eyes. Um, yeah, it's gonna be heavily on Jean, Scott, and Rogue, and then little side pieces between Eric and Professor X, which is which has already been told early in the movie. Now, post credit scene, Professor X making a deal with the government. My X-Men will be protected as long as you don't lay a finger on them or any other innocent mutants. And pretty much that will be the end of the post-credit scene. The end credit scene shows Beast and Storm visiting Magneto at the raft. Storm says to Magneto, "How does it feel that your plan failed? How does it feel that you failed?" And Magneto responds, "Did it? Did I?" End the credit scene. Now I'm gonna stop it right there. That'll be it for part one because this video is already kind of pretty much long. Um, First film being Spider-Man. Of course, the first phase is Earth. If you guys want me to continue this MCU universe, because I'm gonna be breaking down this universe in parts. Because yes, this is a big slide project, but I'm trying to make sure I don't be sitting here just talking for 2 hours. So, but that's all I got for you guys today. Y'all take it easy.